They've worked it out, you think, already?
We've got this kind of unique possibility of getting a deal done with America because, unlike Europe, our trade with the United States is actually quite balanced, and a lot of it for the UK is actually in services rather than goods. So we shouldn't compromise, we shouldn't kind of disable our chances of getting that trade deal done, because actually that's a much bigger prize. So let's just kind of be a bit strategic about this.
How big a prize is a US trade deal? Now, that might sound like a stupid question, right?
Yeah.
But the reason I'm asking
it's a good question.
is people say, if we are going to have a US trade deal, we're going to have to make all sorts of compromises. Donald Trump is going to make a trade deal that benefits the United States, not us. And there's lots of stories about chlorinated chicken and stuff like that. Do we even want a US trade deal?
So I think it depends on how many sectors it covers. So a US trade deal could be really good for a lot of our steelmakers, for example, so a trade deal would get those tariffs back down. It could be really good for tech, it could be good for artificial intelligence, it could be good for the sectors where we're particularly strong. I don't think there's going to be like a traditional free trade deal that covers all things for all people, because agriculture is really hard to get agreed between the UK and the US. And actually, we've got to start looking after our farmers. But we can't, I don't think, jump into retaliatory tariffs right now because it risks undermining that bigger prize.
I'm interested in your view as chair of the Business Committee, because, look, you're a Labour MP as well, but you're also the chair of this committee, and committee chairs, I guess, have kind of a proud parliamentary history of holding the government to account, of being independent, non-partisan. So, hand on heart, what do you make of the government's decision to increase the employer's contribution to national insurance?
So I've written a book about this. I've said that there were different tax options that were available. And, for example, if you take capital gains tax, or let's take a specific example. Let's look at Rishi Sunak's tax return. Rishi Sunak makes $2 million a year. He pays 23% tax because he gets a lot of his income from things like capital gains tax. So I said, well, look, we should be coming up with a better balance of tax. And crucially, we should perhaps have thought about doing our growth plan, our industrial strategy, before we were making some of these other changes.
So are you basically saying that they should have spread it rather than just doing so much on one particular tax?
So personally, that was my advice. And, I've said in Parliament and elsewhere that doing the growth plan before making some of these other changes would have been sensible. Because, look, what most businesses say to us is, look, we can get behind what you're doing on national insurance and employment rights and minimum wage, but we need to know where the growth plan is. What's been really striking, and we've asked so many people this, is that business say, look, we can become the fastest growing economy in the G7, but we've got to have that plan for growth. We've got to start leaning into the sectors where we're particularly strong. That plan, as far as we understand it, has been delayed to the summer. I think that's a mistake. I think actually we should be pulling that plan forward and making it really clear to business about where the growth opportunities are going to come from. You
spent an awful lot of time talking to businesses. From those conversations, has that rise in employers' national insurance led to job cuts?
I don't think it's led to job cuts, but it's definitely led to a number of businesses thinking twice about the investment plans they're making for this year and the employment plans that they're making for this year. I think
future jobs, basically.
Yeah, and I think they haven't taken a final decision yet until they see what the industrial strategy looks like. Think about what that could include. It could include new ways in which we use the power of public procurement to completely change the kind of demand for British products. Lots of governments have been talking about buying British for a long time. This plan promises to really do that. If you can couple that with bringing down energy costs, investing in skills, building regional transport infrastructure, you've got a business plan for Britain which is there for the taking. And, the thing that's surprised me most, actually, is that the amount of consensus we hear from across business and trade unions and consumer groups about the 5 or 6 things that we need to get right. The consensus is there for the taking. People kind of agree on what the business plan for Britain should look like. We just kind of need it on the table now.
OK.